Let's get into some education issues now with Sarah Henderson, who's the Shadow Education Minister. Thanks for joining us again, Sarah. I was intrigued to get your take on what's happening in universities now. Sydney University is the latest one to do this, but they're getting rid of the requirement for maths, Year 12 maths qualifications to get into some courses. Now, this to me seems to be just another reduction of standards, because they're saying that not enough people are getting a good maths education in high school, so therefore they're dropping the standards in university. Shouldn't they be demanding that standards are maintained?
Well, Chris, good afternoon. And yes, we are seeing a change in prerequisites now being offered by the University of Sydney, and arguably this is dumbing down degrees, and it is of a concern because over 20 years we've seen students under our international standards go backwards by about 10% in their mathematics achievements. So we need to work a lot harder to lift our standards in maths, not dumb them down. And the fact that there is no longer an advanced mathematics prerequisite for science and engineering at Sydney Uni has been broadly criticised, and with good reason.
Well, it's a real worry, isn't it? I mean, in the old days you would have expected if people coming out of schools aren't of an adequate standard to get into university degrees, well, then they miss out, and there are fewer people doing those degrees. But the universities are so desperate to keep up their numbers, they're lowering their standards to get people in.
Well, there is very good foundation for that argument, Chris, because there is declining numbers in the universities, and I think there will be for quite some time. And frankly, I don't think that's good enough. But we also have a very big problem with our schools, because 1 in 3 students are failing NAPLAN, and we've seen in the PISA international results, as I mentioned, students also going backwards over some 20 years. So we've been calling very strongly for evidence-based teaching in every Australian classroom, because we know that works. We know that will lift standards. Things like explicit teaching, the teaching of phonics, the latest and most significant evidence-based teaching must be in every classroom. And frankly, we have the National School Reform Agreement, but so far under Jason Clare, the Education Minister, there has been no national agreement and no school reforms agreed at all.
Yeah, it just makes so much sense, and, we just should be getting on with this stuff. Let's hope you do get to do that. I just want to ask you, while we're on the topic of universities, the Monash University Vice-Chancellor, Margaret Gardner, I think, has gone on to be the Victorian Governor. A lavish farewell held for her at the National Gallery in Victoria. It chalked up $127,000. Now, I suppose that's not all taxpayers' money, is it, at a university, but there's some taxpayer involvement. It's just indulgence, over the top and out of touch, isn't it?
Well, a majority of university funding does come from the taxpayer, and of course students make a very big contribution. And Chris, I have to say this is a very bad look. $127,000 spent on a lavish dinner at a time when so many students can barely put food on the table. And of course they've been hit with extraordinarily high indexation of their HECS debts under this government, 11% in total over 2 years. So the average HECS debt has gone up by $2,700 a year, which is just extraordinary under this government. I've been calling on Jason Clare to take action, and I'm certainly calling on Jason Clare to provide some answers as to why the university would dare spend this sort of money farewelling their former Vice-Chancellor. I mean, it's so pretentious, it's so inappropriate, and it comes at the worst possible time.
It's just a disgrace. We're in a cost of living crisis, and that's what they're doing with our money. Thanks for joining us, Sarah.